Pay attention right now, because what I'm about to tell you is not being discussed on CNBC, it's not being debated by your favorite crypto influencer, and it sure as hell is not being broken down by the mainstream media that's been asleep at the wheel for years. Because today, XRP quietly took a step forward that changes everything. And if you blink, you'll miss the setup of a lifetime. I'm talking about a structural shift, a behind-the-scenes move that only insiders, institutions, and people who understand how money really flows would even recognize. And the reason this matters is because when moves like this happen, they don't come with fireworks at first. They come with silence, confusion, and disbelief right before the shock hits and everyone asks, WTF just happened? Think about this logically for a second. Ripple doesn't move unless it has clarity. Institutions don't position unless they've been given the green light, and the SEC doesn't suddenly go quiet unless the game board has already been reset behind closed doors. So ask yourself, why today of all days are we seeing XRP positioned differently across conversations involving cross-border liquidity, tokenization, and settlement layers, while names like BlackRock, the IMF, and even legacy banking corridors keep popping up in the same breath? Coincidence or coordination? Because I can tell you this much: coincidences don't happen at this scale. Before we go any further, do yourself a favor and tap the like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications right now, because the information you're getting here is time sensitive, and once the crowd catches on, the asymmetric edge disappears, and you already know who gets rich in this market: the early, the patient, and the informed. What we're witnessing today is not a price event, it's a positioning event, and price always follows positioning, which is why retail gets shaken out while institutions accumulate quietly, and why XRP has been the most attacked, misunderstood, and suppressed asset in this entire space, because it threatens the plumbing of the global financial system. Not a meme, not a narrative, but the actual rails of money. So stay locked in, because in the next part I'm going to walk you through why today's move is not random, who benefits from it, and why the data points lining up right now should have every serious investor leaning forward in their chair instead of scrolling past this like it's just another crypto update. And this is where things get uncomfortable for the skeptics, because the data does not care about opinions. And right now, the data is screaming something most people are not emotionally prepared to hear. Because when you strip away the noise and look at who is speaking, who is silent, and who is positioning, XRP starts to look less like a speculative token and more like a strategic asset that was designed years in advance for the exact moment we are now entering. Look at the authority signals first, because markets always telegraph power before they telegraph price. And right now, you have the SEC shifting its tone, not with a headline, but with procedural behavior, delayed escalations, narrowed language, and a noticeable absence of the aggressive posture we saw when they wanted to make examples out of projects. And at the same time, you have Ripple executives being invited into conversations that do not include retail narratives, but do include central bank digital currency frameworks, IMF liquidity discussions, and settlement optimization talks that involve legacy institutions who move trillions, not billions. Ask yourself why the IMF keeps emphasizing interoperability and instant settlement while Ripple continues to push XRP as a neutral bridge asset, and then ask yourself why BlackRock's tokenization narrative suddenly aligns with on-chain settlement and liquidity efficiency. Because when Larry Fink talks about tokenized markets, he's not talking about memes, he's talking about infrastructure. And XRP lives right at the center of that conversation, whether the media admits it or not. The data points extend further, because on-chain activity and ledger stability matter more than hype. And XRP's ledger continues to operate with near-zero downtime, low fees, and speed metrics that no proof-of-work dinosaur can touch, which is exactly why institutions can even consider it in the first place, and why Bitcoin maximalists quietly ignore this discussion instead of debating it head-on. This is also why you're seeing Ripple expand corridors, partnerships, and pilot programs during a so-called boring market, because boring markets are where real positioning happens, not during parabolic blow-offs that attract regulators and headlines. Think about the authority of silence for a moment, because when powerful players stop attacking something they once attacked aggressively, that's not mercy, that's resolution. And when regulators stop shouting and start recalibrating, it's usually because the outcome has already been decided decided behind closed doors. This is the same playbook we've seen in traditional finance, from derivatives to ETFs, first ridicule, then resistance, then regulation, and finally adoption, and XRP has already survived the ridicule and resistance phases, which means we are entering the most profitable phase for those paying attention. So the real question is not whether XRP is relevant. The question is whether you will recognize what the data and authority figures are quietly signaling before the catalyst makes it obvious to everyone else. Good, because this is where the weak narratives get exposed and the real catalyst comes into focus, and I need you to listen closely, because this is exactly where retail gets psychologically ambushed and shaken out while smart money loads the boat. The catalyst is never the headline you expect. It's the moment when multiple pressures converge quietly, and today's step forward for XRP is happening at the intersection of regulatory exhaustion, institutional necessity, and technological inevitability, and that combination is deadly powerful. The FUD crowd will tell you XRP is centralized, XRP is dead, XRP already ran, or XRP is controlled, but let's dismantle that nonsense with cold logic, because the same people screaming centralization somehow trust the most centralized institutions on Earth when it comes to ETFs, custody, and liquidity. And now, those same institutions are openly discussing blockchain rails that require speed, compliance, and scalability, which immediately eliminates 90% of this market. Ask yourself this extreme question: if XRP was truly irrelevant, why did it need to be attacked legally for years? Why did the SEC spend millions of dollars and political capital trying to define it? And why did Ripple survive while dozens of other projects vanished into regulatory oblivion? Because you don't waste ammunition on something that doesn't matter. The real catalyst is that the system is under strain right now. Cross-border payments are slow, expensive, and fragmented. Liquidity is trapped, and global trade is demanding instant settlement. And when the pressure builds high enough, solutions don't get debated, they get deployed. And XRP is already sitting there, battle-tested, legally clarified compared to most, and technically capable. Which is why this step forward today is so important, because it signals readiness, not hype. FUD will also scream that price hasn't moved yet, and that's the tell that they don't understand accumulation, because price stagnation during expanding relevance is exactly what accumulation looks like, and it's the same pattern we saw before Amazon, before Bitcoin, before every asset that went on to shock the world. Meanwhile, mainstream crypto media keeps chasing meme volatility because it's easy clicks, while the real story unfolds in boardrooms, regulatory backchannels, and infrastructure planning sessions that never make headlines until it's too late to position. This is where you decide whether you're going to be emotionally manipulated by recycled fear, or whether you're going to recognize that today's move is a chess move, not a dice roll. And the people who understand that are already 3 steps ahead. Now we step into the part that makes people uncomfortable, because price is where belief gets tested and conviction gets forged, and I want to be very clear before the FUD merchants start hyperventilating. This is not about throwing out random moon numbers. This is about understanding how value is derived when an asset is positioned at the core of liquidity rather than at the edge of speculation. XRP's price has never reflected its potential role. It has reflected suppression, uncertainty, and legal overhang. And when those factors begin to evaporate, price discovery doesn't move in straight lines. It snaps, violently and without apology. If XRP is used as a bridge for even a fraction of global cross-border settlements, the math stops being emotional and starts being structural, because trillions of dollars do not move through low-value pipes, and institutions like the IMF, BIS, and major correspondent banks do not build critical infrastructure on assets that cannot scale in both speed and liquidity depth. This is where people scream that higher prices make utility impossible, which is a surface-level misunderstanding, because higher price with deeper liquidity actually enables more efficient settlement, not less, and that's basic market mechanics that most retail has never been taught. The final warning is this: markets punish impatience and reward preparation, and XRP has been a patience test by design. shaking out anyone who couldn't see past short-term candles. And now that patience is approaching its inflection point, when the narrative flips, it will not ask for your permission, it will not wait for confirmation, and it will not give you time to reposition emotionally, because the same voices mocking XRP today will be chasing it once price forces them to pay attention. If you're still waiting for absolute certainty, understand that certainty is the most expensive asset in any market, and by the time it arrives, the opportunity is already gone. So the only real risk left is not volatility, it's disbelief. Then lock in, because this is where everything gets tied together and the message becomes impossible to ignore. What you've just heard is not a prediction pulled out of thin air. It's a pattern recognition exercise that most people are never trained to see. And XRP sits at the center of that pattern whether critics like it or not. Today's step forward was quiet by design, because real shifts in financial infrastructure never announce themselves with fireworks. They announce themselves with alignment, silence from former enemies, and subtle positioning by players whose names never trend on social media, but whose decisions move markets. This is why XRP has survived every attack, every lawsuit, every smear campaign, and every cycle, because it was built to outlast narratives, not ride them. And the longer it was held down, the more explosive the release becomes once pressure is removed. The uncomfortable truth is that most people will not act until price confirms what their mind refused to accept. And by then, the asymmetry is gone, the risk-reward has flipped, and the insiders are already distributing into strength while the latecomers call it luck. You are early not because of the calendar, but because you are paying attention to signals instead of headlines. And that alone puts you in a minority that historically captures the majority of upside in every transformative market. So remember this moment. Remember that while others laughed, dismissed, or doubted, you leaned in and listened, because when XRP's role becomes obvious in hindsight, the question won't be why it happened. The question will be why more people didn't see it coming when all the signs were already there.